That's right, community, it's AI Friday. This week, we'll embed the most pertinent buckets on AI in the news to help you ingest for inference. Before we get going, don't forget to click like and subscribe. And now, unprompted, AI Friday.
You know, Chase, I was going to actually re-record that, but we were in the tower this week, all week in meetings. So unfortunately,
it was too much fun. You didn't have any downtime.
Yeah, it's true. And the funny thing is I was super sick when I first recorded that. So it sounds like I have like a distortion pedal on my voice or something. And it just needs to.
I say double down on it, make it even grittier.
So just full on Cookie Monster death metal at the beginning. Okay. That's a possibility. I might explore that for next one. Welcome, Community Eye. Sorry to get rambling right out of the gates. Welcome to AI Friday. This is the 6th episode. And so thank you for everyone who's been here from the beginning, or if this is your first episode, fantastic. We appreciate it. I'm joined by my LATS co-host, Chase Abbott, who is going to be hanging out today and chit-chatting with us. So
Howdy. Good to be here.
It's great to have you, man.
Thank you.
It's a fabulous fit for the personality of the show. And I did want to also really quickly, before we bring people on to get started with our kind of sci-fi pop culture show, mention very quickly that we do have a couple of different ways to get the show. If you're looking to kind of pay attention to this podcast, the DevCentral is not the only way that you can get this. We also have video on Spotify. So if you didn't know Spotify podcasts had video, they certainly do. They have a whole bunch of other features as well. So if that's more your jam and you like doing your podcasts and keeping them all in one space, you can get that done on Spotify. We're also kind of out there as just audio on Apple and all the other kind of places. I think we're still in process on Amazon, but that should be coming shortly. And if you have something, a podcast platform where you cannot find AI Friday, please just reach out to me on LinkedIn or whatever and let me know. I'm happy to try and get that started. So we have a huge bit of stuff today, right? I mean, what are your thoughts on the Chase? Real quick, what are your thoughts on the whole the sci-fi stuff? Was this challenging for you to kind of contribute?
No. This is all I know. This is what I live. I don't live outside of the sci-fi world. Like reading, video games, movies, that's my jam. This is what I was born to do, is talk about nerdy tech stuff.
Same.
Sci-fi.
Yeah, which is no surprise for anyone who's seen any of my other videos. I will be talking comic books a little bit later, but we do have a couple news pieces, and let's bring on all the peoples to help us out with this. Joel Moses, Lori McVitie, Ken Aurora, and Pete Scheffler back.
All right.
How you guys doing?
Hey, Aubrey.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome, Chase.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, Chase.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Can you say that now?
This is one that we've been kind of cooking up for weeks. I think I don't even remember which one of you guys recommended that we do this, but I think all of you have recommended that we do this at one point or another.
Yeah, the topic at hand is like chum in the water for us. I'm telling you.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, all of these conversations are fairly relevant to what we're seeing out in the field today. So if sci-fi is not your thing, then please, you may actually learn a thing or two.
Oh, yeah.
But before we kind of jump into the sci-fi portion of things, we do have two kind of things we have to talk about. Yeah. And one, DeepSeek, right? The cool thing is I put on LinkedIn that we totally called it. And I don't know if you guys remember, but before last episode, we were hanging out talking about that, going, boy, this might crush the NVIDIA stock. I don't think I saw that it would crush like all tech stocks, but anyone want to jump in? Thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad the DeepSeek topic happened on our positivity episode, because boy, did it spiral into a lot of different areas that are not entirely positive in the past week. Look, when you demonstrate a model that has a distillation aspect like this, things are going to be cheaper. Although it's coming out now that DeepSeek might not have been as cheap to train as they said, because there was some loaner GPU clusters that they were able to take advantage of, and it didn't cost anything to them. But would have cost for someone who was doing native training. These things perform really well, and distilled models perform really well, but of course the distillation has to come from somewhere, and so that naturally leads to, is this just building on top of other people's work, or is this stealing other people's work? And that, that's not a question one can answer reliably, nor is it a question that's really, where did OpenAI get its training set? Does anybody remember? Oh yeah, it's from all of us. Yeah. So when you're looking at where training sets derive from and how distilled training sets work, we're all building on the backs of each other, and that's going to lead to some uncomfortable discussions at the corporate level, I'm sure.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think this distillation, it brought to light this distillation idea, both the legal aspects you brought up, and also as a technologist that's coming out, right, distillation, it really compresses the model, but it comes at a cost, and it comes at the cost of fragility. Yeah. We can see that how much easier DeepSeek is to jailbreak and to leak data. And then aside from, you were talking about how it's trained, I think they also probably cut corners in training. There was an entire ClickHouse database that was trained on it, right? You can now get the contents of a ClickHouse database if you ask DeepSeek the right questions.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, if I remember correctly, I think DeepSeek even left its ClickHouse database open to the public accidentally.
Yeah.
So hey, come on. This is new technology. This is emergent technology. Yeah, there is no question DeepSeek is doing some kind of cool stuff. They're actually programming IPU functionality into GPUs, which that tickles all of my fancy. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this is going to go, but it is kind of spinning a little bit out of control. I do want to note that today is the day that OpenAI has said they are going to announce and release O3 Mini, I believe. And a lot of people are going to have their eyes directly focused on how accurate and how it performs relative to DeepSeek. And so, yeah, watch your stocks, folks.
Well, my question is, and going back, like everybody focuses on, did they use GPUs? How much did it cost? Where did they get the data? What about the architecture? It's using multi-level attention as opposed to, attention is everything, right, Ken? You say that a lot. How it actually reasons is different. And nobody's looking at that. We're just all like, where to get the data? Well, it stole it, just like everybody stole our data. So whatever, right? But, what does that do? Is that important to the whole discussion and how AI is going to be used? Or is that a non-starter? Have we decided OpenAI did it right? Transformers, inductive reasoning is fine. Let's go.
Well, any NASCAR fan will tell you the wrecks draw more attention than the race. So that's where we are today.
I was curious about the NVIDIA stock price because as a gamer, we've been angry at the US and China for creating such an inflated price on GPUs. But so we already knew that China, besides the US, was one of the largest consumers of NVIDIA hardware, even at a restricted throughput due to the embargoes. So it was still NVIDIA hardware training these systems until they can build their own sufficient GPU to compete with that. So the fact that NVIDIA had such a big hit was kind of surprising to me, even though we all knew it'd probably bounce back anyway.
Yeah, I think this is kind of an overreaction by investors. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Like I said, OpenAI's got some releases coming out today, and we'll get a more insight next week, I guess.
Yeah, Rory, that's a great teaser for a future episode of like those architectures. NVIDIA, DeepSeek did a couple of interesting things, but there's some great stuff coming.
It's funny you mentioned that, but when I was in Seattle this week, I talked to Paul Pindell about architectures and the need for reference architectures out there, just so people can kind of compare like to like and things like that. So maybe we'll, I told Paul maybe we'll have him on and talk about that in a future one.
Right.
Personally, I was a little shocked that in the head-to-head, I don't know if I'm sure you guys read head-to-head stuff too. I found it odd that DeepSeek actually had some very quote-unquote simple mathematical errors. It got all the advanced stuff great, but the strange 1 or 2 bits where it really flubbed some simple things, I thought that was telling. So
isn't that proof of like high intelligence? Because I can do really complex things, but I can't get my printer to work. Right?
Printers don't work, so that's okay.
Yeah, the true measure of intelligence is tip calculation in less than 15 seconds. Yeah,
right.
I got it.
Well, you can always get someone else to do tip calculation for you, which is similar, in fact, to our other little piece of news here, which is that OpenAI released their operator functionality, which I thought was pretty intriguing. It's sort of like to me, felt like computer use, right? From that we're seeing with
Claude,
Anthropic and Claude or Cloud, if you
Claude.
But so that's another one. I don't know if any of you guys have had a chance to check that out. I haven't done it yet, but it seems really promising to me.
Yeah, it seems that like no matter what we do, the where we are today, the ultimate API for everything is your eyeball, and things that can use the eyeball API are going to be the most portable and the most usable.
The
That's a good
API
point.
then?
Screen scraping. I mean, we've got cron, we've got screen scraping, we've gone back to the early 2000s of the web, and we're applying it all to AI. I'm waiting for the real stuff to come.
Yeah.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Somebody's got to release a version of this technology and call it the Eye of the Beholder. That would be pretty awesome. As a D&D fan.
A D&D reference.
Yeah.
Didn't take us long.
Yeah.
Speaking of D&D reference, is it time to get to some sci-fi?
I think it is. I do. And I think that's probably what we're all waiting for. So let's kind of bring this up and just to kind of give the community a heads up. I think what we're going to do here is we are going to kind of go through things. Ken's got a bit of a history, followed by a topic by Joel, and then we've each got a couple of things that we're going to sort of hit on things. So this history, Ken, was pretty deep. It was neat.
Yeah, it was. Well, this all got prompted by all the times that I think most of us get asked, oh, well, what's going on? What's going to happen with AI in the future? And I'm old enough that I get a little cynical sometimes. It's like, what's that line? I think it was a Heisenberg line that was, not only is the future stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine. And it's like, yeah, what we think of as technology, computers, AI is definitely shaped by the time we're in. And I thought I'd do the little history lesson. Start with that. It's like I go back to going back 100 years, and we were talking about movies. So it's like, okay, the first movie I think of when I think of science fiction is Metropolis. And go back to the 20s. This is right, during the Industrial Revolution, after the Great War, and people are thinking about maybe robot machines and what can they imagine robot machines to be like there. They think of them as, well, they look like humans, they look like us, and they, well, how do they think? Well, they think, Frankenstein wasn't so new then, but it was all sort of a slightly less intelligent version of us, but a lot like us.
Right.
And that's just the lens we viewed things. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all the stuff that we have today. So I think the people at the time just looked at technology through what they had at the time. And then you kind of fast forward a bit, say, go forward 20 years or so. And then amazing stuff, right? In the 1930s, right, you had, I think that was when Amazing Stories, Pulp Fiction came out, space opera. Chase will love that, right? And then we'd just gotten through, by the late 40s, we'd gotten through World War II. And there was a lot of optimism. We could do whatever we humans could do whatever we wanted. It was tempered maybe with the Americans and the Soviets and the arms race, but nature could be tamed. It was us against the Soviets, coloring all this. And I think about that, the movies that are there. Also, Forbidden Planet with Robbie the Robot. You had, and then people remember the original Day the Earth Stood Still. And again, computers, these robots, they were sentient. But they also started getting this idea of they were intelligent, but they weren't creative. We started going to creativity as the thing that separated humans. But these things were so much physically superior. They were so much stronger. They were, Gort the robot was indestructible.
But that's a typical theme in anything, right? Like when it's a story or it's a movie, there has to be that versus in it, right? So if we can just take them, then that's not really all that exciting. So there's no story in it. So it has to be that panic element, right? So they create this oh no kind of feeling, right? So
right. But I would say that back then, and it changed over the years, but back then the robots weren't weren't the major threat. They were still subservient, right? Robbie still
Mm-hmm.
listened to forget the doctor's name, but the master, and Gort was still subservient to the human that ran him, right? There was still this idea of they had limited free will, that they were obedient and they didn't. I think we'll see that change in the next like 20 years after this, but at the time they were still listening to us.
That's right.
I mean, 3 laws of robotics. I mean, we see that today, right? Asimov came up with this in 1940. So what, 80 years ago, more than 80 years ago. And yet today's AI alignment basically just uses those same ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same thing.
The interesting thing about that was we also, as we kind of talked about this show over the week, I watched the video of, robot abuse, which was pretty intriguing.
Right.
Like, you take a look at the 3 laws there, and it's kind of, it's almost like an unfair thing for the robots.
So first of all, I want to condemn that video on 19 different levels, but it was a remote toy, right? Like, I'm still not sure whether that was real or not. I guess it was real.
Right.
But the artifacts in some of that video looked like it wasn't real. But somebody was just controlling that, really. Like, they were just telling it where to go and what to do. And there was no, they might have been kicking a chair. It was the fact that it was humanoid that it got to our senses, right? I think, Lori, you mentioned it. If it was cute like a Roomba or something like that, you would have even been more upset. But I think it was the humanality of that.
Yeah, Ken, I think it's really.
You said the robot. You said I said a Roomba would be cute, right? I mean, there's nothing cute about it, but it's humanoid. So the fact that they were beating on this thing, really, that it was completely helpless. It was like somebody beating up a helpless person in the street. Like, it was really wrong. And I didn't watch the whole thing because I couldn't watch the whole thing, honestly. There was 9 reasons I didn't like that video. So
I think that's what makes it so horrible. It's not necessarily the robot. I can look at it and go, okay, it's like a Roomba or any other automation thing. It has no feelings. It's not getting hurt by this, but it is the way that the humans treat it, right? It was more their joy and pleasure in abusing this helpless thing because it couldn't fight back, right? And we know that. And so that interaction is like, it's almost like exposing, right, something in humanity that makes you go, ooh, not cool.
Ew.
And I mean, when my Roomba gets trapped in a room, like, the app says it needs help, right? It personifies it, and you were like, oh, you poor little thing. And I don't kick it. If it gets stuck in a room, I'll sort of, put my feet in a V and sort of direct it. I don't pick it up and move it. I mean, there's a humanoid part to it. Like, I just feel like I can't do that.
I don't know about you guys. I do not have that much Roomba love. I just find it frustrating. I mean, I was much more disturbed by the Boston Dynamics. I'm a dog person. The Boston Dynamic dog being beat up bothered me a lot more.
Yeah. Remember that one.
Hey, Ken, I think it's a really interesting point, by the way, Ken, that you have the 3 laws of robotics up here. In a lot of ways, these have been hugely influential in setting targets for AI safety. But it's no more sophisticated than that, right? It almost seems like the 3 laws of robotics need a little bit of a revision in terms of the intelligence that's facing us now via AI. But alignment derives from these 3 laws, which is kind of a really interesting thing.
But laws are made to be changed and updated, and again, like I was saying, there's a process to update those, and I think we need to make sure that, and I think the OpenAI documentation and that their rule set, like their whatever they forget what they call them, but whatever that document is, that's supposed to be a living document. But I don't think there's checks and balances in what those documents are yet. I think the community needs to drive those, and I don't think government needs to drive those, but I think the community needs to drive those to
I think the problem is there was an opportunistic thought process around the first laws. And then the robots, when they apply the 3 laws, they're applying it to a totality of humanity. And unfortunately, those laws then apply to the lowest common denominator of people. And we tend to forget there's some pretty problem people out there that it's going to use to make the basis for the rest of us.
Well, that gets into training, and that's my son didn't understand why that video was so rough, but kind of jumping ahead in your time frame here, Ken. What happens when the genie gets out of the bottle, right? And I told my son, like, if this was AGI, what are you training this robot to feel or to know what humanity is? Right. And that's where we go with this.
Right. And so we're getting to exactly what Peter said. Now these things start getting a little more empowered. But I think, because I frame this in the mindset of the 60s and the 70s, right? The 60s, there was a lot of upheaval. There was a lot of distrust of large entities, corporations, government, at least in the U.S. And the economy in the 70s wasn't doing well, and people were concerned. So the theme that I sort of noticed in a lot of the movies from that period was that, okay, we've got this, now we can start building intelligent computers, but what happens when there's hidden agendas, when they're not safeguarded? And, the classic for this, right, is 2001. HAL failed because there was a hidden agenda there. There was somebody that said, hey, don't tell anybody, but go look at those monoliths. Yeah. Or if those of you are Star Trek fans, I'm sure there's some Star Trek fans, right? If you remember the first episode that had Dr. Daystrom and the M5 computer the episode was called The Ultimate Computer. And the failure there was that it had the same, Star Trek was really ahead of its time anyways. The failings there were human failings. It was that computer sort of went crazy because it had its creators, insecurities and faults. And that was the sort of insufficient safeguard. Yeah. You had one person who had all this power, and I won't even talk about Westworld because Joel wants to talk about that later.
I want to talk about Westworld. This is absolutely, this is bad prompt design. If you really get right down to it, Hal was instructed to do something, and was not instructed beyond the initial instruction and the initial goal, and so it had to make up its the missing pieces of its prompt, and I think that's absolutely something that applies to AI today. And boy, man, can a single LED light be much more imposing than HAL? I mean, really, that's a wonderful acting performance by an LED, frankly.
And for that long, that is that is forever ingrained now. Scary red light, bad robot.
And so I think it's prompt, but it's also transparency, right? Like you can't trust everything that an AI tells you unless you have a basis to know what the trust is. So if it's telling you to do something and you know why it's doing it, then you can follow it. If it's just telling you to do it and you follow it blindly, which in some cases we do just follow things blindly because someone else does, then that's the problem, right? So you need transparency in the AI models. I like how when you're asking questions now of a chatbot that you get the reference, so you can go and find out if you're like, I don't really think that's right. You get the reference information, and so that transparency is now becoming more expected in the process.
Mm-hmm. And Ken's right. The 60s and 70s were there was a lot of optimism in technology. Helping us through wars and things like that from the 40s and 50s. And so that the science fiction of the time kind of looked at machines and technology intelligence as helpers and subservient to us. And then we began to get really skeptical, just based on society having a dystopian view of the future. And that's where all these movies come from. It's a really cool transition.
Yeah, I think to that end, did HAL really fail? That is an interesting question. I think HAL was just, as we said, doing what he or it had to do. They had to do, and really, that I think does kind of lead into when they get to be out of control, right? I mean, that's to me led into this whole the look at the Terminator eye right there, nice little red LED. The same.
Yeah, I got to ask with RoboCop, when they take off the helmet, he's still got the bullet embedded in his scalp. It's like, why didn't you just take that out? You're basically retooling this individual, but you don't bother to take care of that. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
Helps
But yeah,
kind of-
80s and 90s.
He's asking questions. Take him out. Sorry.
Yes. Anyway, 80s and 90s, you know, technology was in overdrive in the 80s and 90s, and the movies related to technological intelligence are in overdrive. I mean, Terminator, RoboCop, Matrix, Ghost in the Shell. Yeah. These are you know, these I think more than most shape the way we view artificial intelligence in the 2000s. Yeah, these movies do.
They do. They also, another theme, right? You started seeing in the 90s, and I realized afterwards, I left off, I think, the progenitor of all these blurred reality things, Tron, and all this master control program. And yeah, we started, that was VR. You remember VR was a popular thing in the early 90s. And yeah, this is and Peter, you were talking earlier about the really empowered. Now this is that to me, the culmination of the fully empowered, out of control, and super, you know, physically powerful device, right? In Terminator, RoboCop, they embodied that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like and this theme keeps coming up, right? Out of control, out of control. What we really mean, and we should be specific, is out of our control.
Yeah, yep, 100%.
Because really, I mean, being out of control, our control is that, right? It's only bad if, right? I mean, there's a whole discussion there that we probably don't have time for, but
that actually could go forward. That actually starts getting into the next discussion.
Yes, indeed.
I didn't know that, but I'll pretend I did.
Yeah, I mean, no, it is because, right? Well, actually, we'll even see that in the one after this, but it'll stay here for a moment, right? We start saying, okay, yeah, they could be out of control. Maybe we shouldn't treat them like crap.
That video, exactly like that video.
And when we started thinking about, like, well, what happens, and you know, AI, about like what happens if you're an artificial child, and there's a kind of covered in there is also the emergence of, there was this underground free robot culture going on, and Wall-E sort of a tongue-in-cheek version of that, but you know, Battlestar Galactica, which came out there, that was about faith and what is society, what is a AI society like, and it was, to me, it was sort of that uncanny valley sort of, it was similar enough but different. And we started thinking about AIs as, I could use the word here, not quite peers but near peers, and they were sentient, and I had to go back to 1990 because I thought it was a little prescient, but that classic Next Generation episode where they debate whether data is not sentient, but they debate what rights data has.
Yeah.
Whether data.
Sorry,
I can see you're cringing because it's a tough call.
It's for Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica. Ooh, that's hard for me to say. Were the Cylons? Were they all like bots or like humanoid?
Artificial intelligences, and
in the new one.
I don't think I
in the new one
ever came across to me that there was no humans in there. I don't think that I ever grasped that. I haven't watched the recent ones. I'm talking about.
There were like the Centurions or whatever that were looked much more robotic, like the old. You know, they also had the red laser eyes.
Yeah.
But all these guys.
Right. Yeah. I love this era of science fiction as it relates to artificial intelligence, because we start thinking about, okay, what does all this mean? Like before, it was like, this is happening, and look what could possibly happen. And now we're like, okay, this is going to happen, so let's explore what this means in terms of ethics and philosophy. And boy, is it thought-provoking, because, you know, everything is on a knife's edge as it relates to ethics in intelligence. And really good explorations here. I loved the episode "A Measure of a Man" from Star Trek: The Next Generation. I thought that was a really interesting way to view something that was designed to be intelligent and exceeded the sum of its parts.
Well done episode.
Yeah, very well done episode. Loved Wall-E. You know, Wall-E was effectively a silent movie for a good portion of it, and very effectively communicated emergent intelligence, and I thought that was a good movie.
For me, Wall-E, my kids who are turning 30 this year, so they were just 8 years old at the time, or I guess maybe 10, or maybe because they were just in their early 10s, whatever it was. Is a huge movie for them. And I think of the people that watched, the kids that watched that at that time, that was a really powerful movie in what it set. and I think those that generation, as they're moving into their their 30s and their 40s, and they start to really affect change corporately, I think movies like that are going to be powerful in this AI space. That one really resonates with me. I think I've watched that one on a plane 3 or 4 times when I had nothing else to watch, and like I don't watch something twice, and I love that movie. It's really well done, and
it was really.
I love that Battlestar Galactica still, right, because it's reminiscent to me of the Last Supper, and you're talking about the society there, right, and you think about the humans in that they're actually essentially polytheistic. I mean, I'm getting religion a little bit, and the Cylons were monotheistic, and this is kind of like the Last Supper in some ways. And I thought it was like a great. It's like it was a fairly, a lot of religious overtones, but it was, you've got a real society, a distinct belief system.
Yeah, the idea of what does an artificial intelligence society look like not just an individual intelligence, but what if you bundle all of them together? How do they interoperate and interact with each other? And that was a really interesting exploration.
Well, this is the philosophy. This is the way that the thinkers today get their message out. Right, in the Enlightenment, they would write a pamphlet and share letters. Nobody reads, and the majority of people just don't have time for that. But this they will consume. So they're working through all of these philosophical challenges through media, because that is how we consume things since we were kids.
Yeah. And that gets us to today, right? And
that's right.
Oh, and I think there's one more that I made for this.
You did?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and now, we actually have true peers. They're actually, and I don't have anything more recent than this, but going back about 10 years, we had Her and Ex Machina are the 2 movies I think of where we actually start exploring how there could be distinct societies of their own, although in these 2 cases they don't have whole societies. But how do we as humans interact? And it seems to get us closer and closer to collaborators. I might view this also through the lens of race relations that were a big topic in this time period, and whether Black Lives Matter is one, the most obvious example. Well, what about other sentient forms, right? Are we can use them as we can look at how we treat other humans as a model for how we treat these other forms of sentience, and vice versa. What we can, movie makers can, storytellers can say, okay, I'll bring up this other artificial thing, but I can use it as a parable for how we should treat each other.
Yeah, these movies were so rife during this time period that my wife actually began calling these "I fell in love with Siri" movies. But yeah, people are developing relationships with artificial intelligence constructs. I mean, we've actually seen that occur. People record YouTube videos of themselves interacting in an almost romantic sense with artificial intelligence systems, LLMs. So this, from all the way forward, from when we're building machines that look like humans in the 20s and 30s, and then we're fascinated by the possibilities of the technology to serve us as an intelligent assistant, all the way through to today, where we're interacting with them as peers. Science fiction has come full circle. It's followed this technology all the way through and shown us the future. So it's fantastic. I love these.
Agreed. Yeah, that's and before we kind of scoot on, I just wanted to put one quick word in there that has nothing to do with the coolness of artificial intelligence, and that is the newer BSG was awesome. If you haven't seen it, please go. I mean,
okay.
I had friends that and that's to the community out there too. I had friends that told me about Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica for quite some time, and I just kind of laughed and went, no, I was a kid and that was fun, but it's a really, really good thought-provoking series.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
this is something I have noticed, and that there are a lot of movies that cover off what I would call the spontaneous emergence of intelligence. A movie reference to artificial intelligence that is embodied in the idea that you can take a machine that's designed to follow instructions but embody no particular general intelligence beyond the task that it's been given, and then you give it an outside force, something. out of which general intelligence just suddenly sparks. It can come from any source. It can come from like abuse, like we talked about just a little bit ago. It can come from happy accidents, devotion to task, shadowing human thought, or just sheer cosmic magic applying from the outside. And the one that I want to focus on, and Ken talked about it a little bit, is 1973's Westworld. This is a sci-fi tour de force. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this in the group here.
Many times.
But Yul Brynner is just one of the most incredibly scary androids ever in sci-fi history. This movie was written by Michael Crichton, by the way. A lot of people don't remember that, who, of course, went on to make Unix famous in a little film called Jurassic Park. This is the story of a future amusement park where guests can pay to live out their Wild West dreams with the help of lifelike androids, but they gradually descend into cold-blooded abuse, just like the YouTube videos pushing around the robotic dogs. A mysterious pattern of errors and breakdowns occur. It doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason. The treatment worsens, and the androids begin to break the laws. They begin to defend themselves. And Yul's character of Gunslinger is amazingly acted and represents something I think we should all remember about AI systems. They learn, and perhaps they will eventually learn that toleration isn't the only defense. This is a great movie and a really interesting way to look at emergent intelligence.
I saw this movie too young.
Did you?
It affected me.
Especially when people are taking their faces off.
Oh
that especially for the time, for 1973, the effects of this movie are pretty good. They're all practical, but they're really good.
What'd you think of the reboot?
Red Eyes again.
Oh, and the Red Eyes, yeah.
Red Eyes, but
Is that the same actor?
Yeah.
It is. Moving forward, though, there's also 1986's Short Circuit, a Steve Guttenberg film starring Ali Sheedy as well. Now, if you can suspend your disbelief over Steve Guttenberg being one of the most talented malcontent engineers, it's an amusing story of a government weapons factory and Saint Robot Number 5, who's effectively a laser-wielding tank with inexplicably eyebrows. You have a bit of an errant power surge in Number 5 malfunctions, after which his instruction-starved CPU begins demanding data. That data is primarily given to him by Ali Sheedy's character Stephanie, primarily by nighttime TV, which is how we all hope to learn humanity, frankly. It's a great movie with Fisher Stevens' cringy stereotype performance in it notwithstanding, and has some great lines like Number 5 alive, and my personal favorite, no disassemble. Yeah, which I can't help but say every time I compile something in Visual Studio. But I love this movie, and I think it was filmed up in Astoria, Oregon, and it's a fun telling of something that can emerge from a system that's designed to do one thing, but something magic happens and it begins to think for itself. Really fun movie.
I was almost in a scene in Short Circuit 2 because that was filmed in Toronto. So
that is a much different and, shall we say, not
something I tell people very often. But yes.
Now, going forward, though, let's jump back to 1983, and we have War Games. Ironically, it's by the same director as Short Circuit, but it has a completely different tone. I don't need to say too much about this movie because many people I know in cybersecurity can quote nearly every line in this movie. And they point to this as their raison d'etre. But we can't pass over the emergence of Joshua within Whopper, the system on the bottom there, as a great example of spontaneous emergence of intelligence. This is one of those, it's prompted by a single-minded devotion of a system to perform a task without given specific instructions. This is bad prompt design writ large. And in the end, it has to learn by doing everything, only to find out that its entire purpose, its entire prompt, which is to game out the end of humanity, isn't even a valid prompt. And so I think that this movie has super applicability in the AI time.
I love it. Went through the exhaustive search of the search tree and said, wait, there is no winning move.
Exactly. How about a nice game of chess?
I like that it's
which by the way, AI will win every single time. So flipping forward into 2011, we're getting into movies with absolutely banging soundtracks, something you can surely say about Real Steel starring Hugh Jackman. And this film it really is, by the way, intended to be based on the plastic Rock'em Sock'em Robots game of the 60s and 70s, but brought forward into a Detroit of the future where humanity has gotten so bored with UFC that it's outlawed humans fighting each other, and instead humans want gigantic metal robot carnage. These robots have zero brains whatsoever because their innards usually end up spread around the ring. Hugh's character Charlie has an estranged son. I'm going to point that out because it's a common theme. His name is Max, and Max is kind of a technical genius. He finds a mysterious robot in a junkyard. He gives it the ability to shadow human behaviors, and in this shadowing process, this robot begins to exhibit very father-like behaviors towards Max. But is it designed in? Is it emerging? It's really hard to tell. By the end of the movie, you're left wondering whether this robot is more than the sum of his parts.
So is there a Mike Tyson? Is there a Mike Tyson bit in this movie too?
No Mike Tyson bit in this movie. Mike Tyson in this movie would have been outlawed. I think this movie is supposed to take place in like 2028, as seen from 2011. So yeah, the future.
It's likely. I can see that happening in just a few years. I can see it.
So Joel, would you say that this movie blurs? How do they depict? Like, do these movies have a take on? Is this actually sentient and conscious, or is it just faking it?
No, they leave that as an exercise for the viewer to try to figure out, is there something big there? Is there something important? Is there something different about this robot? Or is it just the love between a father and a son? It's again, this movie I think didn't do terribly well in the theaters, but it's actually a pretty good movie, and I like it. I like it as an example of emergent technology.
The eyes have changed. You notice that?
They have, precisely. Yeah. And it does have, and again, if you look at a lot of the other robots that are portrayed in this, they don't have eyes or they look inhuman. This one looks vaguely human and has eyes, and that's also kind of important and hails back to Ken's reference to Metropolis from the 20s. Going forward, it's hard to tell where emerging intelligence is coming from in 2010's Tron Legacy. This has the most banging soundtrack from Daft Punk. Extending on Disney's 1982 computer saga Tron, we witnessed Jeff Bridges' main character, Kevin Flynn, reconnect with his son. You see? That's a theme. And try to protect what he calls the ISOs, which are isomorphic algorithms. They're programs that are not written, but once a system gets so sophisticated, ISOs just happen. Spontaneously, and they work spontaneously, and so that's a really good example of emergent technology through extremely sophisticated systems from cosmic magic. All of these things all of these spontaneous emergence films, they basically hinge on one theme: that a machine that it must be more than the sum of its parts because humans did make it. In some cases, it's for human amusement. That Roomba is so cute. In other cases, it's our fear that our creations will surpass us without us lifting a finger. My Roomba wants to kill me. And that's my 5.
Yeah. Okay. So that's wait a minute. So then I think, where did the next one come from then? This guy.
Oh, that's me.
That's right. These are excellent examples of emergent intelligence in literature. I'm sorry, I'm not that sophisticated. I stuck with movies.
So the interesting I like about these is how humans interact with AI. So you got the Murderbot Diaries. You have Neuromancer, which is amazing, but it also is only predicated by how willing we are to kind of dive into AI in our own lives. Like create our own problems with the embracement of AI. WALL-E, it's WALL-E. And then Stray was an interesting video game that just came out. Where you play the cat after humanity has actually wiped itself away, and little AI robots have taken over our world, and so you navigate an entirely AI world of just curious robots going about their lives, but taking on very human architectures. And
so
then
the cats are controlling the AI bots like they control us.
Yeah, the humans are gone. We wiped ourselves away, and there's just cats and robots.
Well, Chase, I haven't played that game right now yet, but is part of the dynamic in there pushing things off of other things?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. Great game design then.
Yeah, and then we'll get into Tarzan case in a minute, I think.
Yeah, and I have to say, regarding the pushing things off tables, just to go to D&D for a second, that's tabaxi stuff right there, man. Right when you're trying to solve the big mystery, you go, is there a glass on the table?
Yeah. I do think one really cool thing you brought up, Neuromancer, Snow Crash was another one I was thinking of. This whole, and Matrix being another. This idea of an alternate dystopia is that the computers pull us into their world, right? The predominant theme is the other way around. Like, they get empowered in their physical world, but there's this other thing, like we end up in their world and we are completely subservient to them and they're in control, which is, I think, an interesting twist on how AI might take control.
Yeah. I'm going to guess that Elon Musk at some stage was a fan of the book Neuromancer, just given the fact that X is Grok and the other business that he's involved in is Neuralink. And these things, these things seem to be echoes of things that occur in sci-fi literature, especially related to Gibson.
I can't hear Neuralink without thinking Neuromancer, because it's literally, I have the images of the guy jacking in, and so.
I think Musk's goal is he wants to be the first human who's actually brain taped.
Ooh, wow. I should have. I think I probably should have talked about Johnny Mnemonic as well. That's another interesting example of AI systems being jacked into the backs of our skulls. Hopefully, we're a little ways away from that. I'm not ready for my port yet.
There was a time when AI was not jacked into your skull, but was something that you drove in, right?
Oh, yeah. This is what happens when you teach an AI to respect the Hoff, ladies and gentlemen. Knight Industries 2000 kit. Every boy I knew wanted to have this car. The funniest thing about this show that I thought, well, yes, okay, granted, some still want it. The funniest thing about this show is the car that it was based on was out of production by the time the show started, and yet it still looked futuristic. I think it's the red eye on the front.
I actually got my photo taken inside of Kit in like some mid-'80s car show at the Kingdom. But I was angry because the car was off, so none of the lights were on.
Yeah.
It looks very Cylon-ish to me, like the original Cylon.
But there was something like not benevolent, or it didn't look mean. Like that's
true.
I don't know how to do the negative of all those, but it didn't look mean, even so it was a red bouncing thing. Whereas the Cylons, there was something about them that bouncing red line was menacing.
I think it was the sound, right? Yeah. They're distinctly different sounds for the Cylons, than Kit. Plus, his voice was he kept a very measured tone, even when he was being really sarcastic, which probably explains why I loved it so much. So much snark.
And even
I loved it.
Exactly. And even after the show jumped the shark with super pursuit mode, which was just fast forwarding the film by 10x.
Yeah.
Right.
But
forgot about that.
Oh well.
We got some of this, right? I mean, you've got cars that can self-drive, they can talk to you. My car, I can talk to my car and tell it to do things, and it will do things. We can't hold a conversation. It can't search databases, and it doesn't have rockets. And
you're right. They still play this show on late night TV, and it was remarkable to me how many advancements in Kit and have actually happened. They're in cars today, self-driving systems and pilot assist and things like that. Those were super futuristic during this show, but they're here today. But no rocket launchers. I still want my
vector database and RAG to take to all of my different devices, so I can plug it in and personalize it.
There you go.
And no sarcasm. My car is not sarcastic, which is disappointing because
it is.
I thought
the Google I talk to in my truck is not nearly as sarcastic as I would like it to be.
I drive a Volvo, so it won't be sarcastic. It'll just be brutally honest.
You missed your turn again.
I honestly think that this example kind of speaks a little bit to training, because if you remember the villain car in this show, it was Carr, Karr.
That's right.
But that's okay. What if your training is a little bit different? What if you take it outside Knight Industries, where they clearly trained on, fun sarcasm and ability to interact with humans versus
They trained it in LA.
Kill.
And the Hoff, of course.
Yeah.
Always the Hoff.
You got to have the Hoff, but right and that goes back to the 3 laws. I mean, the 3 laws were designed to protect human life, but and for some reason we seem to default to the assumption that everyone would put those laws into an AI, and no one would ever consider using other laws that are maybe exactly the opposite. Right. So,
well, I wouldn't say no one. I mean, I was at a just separately a DoD conference, and they were talking about AI, and they had a very different view of laws that are appropriate.
This is 3 laws safe with flamethrowers.
Everything's better with flamethrowers.
Everything.
But yeah, and in fact, there was an actual debate about what laws we here in the U.S. military would be using, and how they might compare with what we expect our adversaries to be using.
Good question.
It's funny you talk about the DoD military usage, and that kind of brings us back to the Interstellar, Case and Tar. These two, I know, Chase, you really love these guys.
I love them because they're non-humanoid. They're absolutely utilitarian to the design requirements they're made for. But I like how they're interacted with by the crew, and the crew is changing their behaviors based off the situation. I can change the honesty setting on fly. I can change humor settings, but they still retain both individual personalities based off their original design. One is scientist based. The other one is much more marine, combat assistant based. But then also that psychologically, they're accompaniment droids, they're companions to provide that sort of safe feeling in multi-year interstellar journeys.
Isn't there a scene? Yeah. It's been so long since I've seen that. Isn't there a scene where they pick up one of the actors and carry them off the planet, to get them back?
Yeah. And then you suddenly realize the complexity of the design when it starts to come apart in order to carry something and then run around. You're like, wow.
I agree. This was really creative, especially since sci-fi is rife with things, the machines that forcibly are made to look sort of human. Yeah. Like Johnny Five with his eyebrows. Like, really? Did you have to?
It actually drives me bonkers because, our bodies are made to sustain an enlarged brain. That's really what we're designed around. Whereas other systems have stopped evolving. You have cockroaches and sharks and stuff. They became perfect for their environment. So these things are created specifically for environmental superiority. There was another Antonio Banderas movie, I think. I don't remember the name of it, but it was he was investigating AI. It was kind of like a low Blade Runner, but at the end, there's a law where robots cannot create themselves, so they would deprecate. And then there's a super robot that starts modifying other robots. Its final form is some sort of dog cockroach thing because it realized it's moved on from kind of human design for its own sustainability, and it's going to flee to a radiation zone to get away from humans because we treat them like crap.
Yeah.
Well, but if you look at I built a robot in my final year of high school, for a science fair project, and it was a pick and place robot. Other than the fact that it had an arm and it sort of turned 90 degrees, there was no humanoid part to it. And if you look at a industrial robot, the only times where they are humanoid in any respect is where they have to interact with something that a human's going to work with later. So if it's a car part that a mechanic is going to need to put their hands on and do something with, then there's a hand component to it or whatever, but it doesn't they're not humanoid at all because it's a waste of effort. It's a waste of energy, all the other things. You optimize for what you have to get to. Right. And that's what these things have done. They've just said, we have to do this. We have to be able to move. We have to reconfigure. That's all we have to worry about doing. So the robots themselves in real life, not in TV world, get out of the pop culture conversation, but they optimize for the mission they have, and that's it. And if it's just one mission, they don't need to do all kinds of things. They don't need an opposable thumb. They just need to make sure that they've got enough that they can grab the right thing, and that's it. Right.
A mechanical engineering professor once told me that the perfect robot looked like a rail. not like a human, not like a hand, not like a leg. It looked like a rail with tools hanging off of it.
Yep.
And that was the optimal way to get something created from task 1 to task 5 is to construct it in a straight line. And that's why I really love how Interstellar brought forward that concept. These are rails, basically. Foldable ones, but rails nonetheless.
Well, they love the Roomba because we don't have Rosie the robot like the Jetsons said we would. We have Roomba the robot.
There was speaking of intelligence, right? I'm trying to remember the name of the series. There's this book, Forever and Ever. It's not quite it, where essentially it's brain taping, like Musk wants, except you would transfer your brain into different bodies optimized for, and you would colonize the galaxy was colonized this way. And your body was optimized for the environment it was going into. And it wasn't the main focus of the book, but one of the interesting things was how different forms, as your body took different forms, how that affected the inherent intelligence that was being put into it.
Mm. Have you ever read Bob, like the Bobiverse?
Yeah, the We Are Legend series.
Yeah, that's fantastic. If you ever have a chance to, I think I don't know if it's just an audiobook, but I listened to the audiobooks and they're fantastic. And again, it's a human who becomes a computer, basically a spaceship computer.
Yeah.
And the things that he goes through and the process it's spans, I don't know, several hundred, several thousand years, whatever it is. And it's very cool how they really do talk about just optimizing for what you need and then creating a spaceship that meets the needs, but has a generation of a Bob brain in it. So
right, R2D2 and his arm, right? He was designed for utility. R2D2. We made it through here. We didn't talk about Star Wars. R2D2,
of course not.
Right? Very utilitarian. He's got tools that come out, right? And he doesn't even speak language. And C-3PO, who's supposed to be a protocol droid and interact with people, has a humanoid look.
Right. Yeah, that's actually an excellent example. I didn't cover this in emergent technology, but Ken kind of reminded me in terms of uploading consciousness is one of these concepts where you create an artificial intelligence out of a natural one. I almost talked about Max Headroom, the TV show. But I stuck with movies instead. Max Headroom is kind of, it strikes on all of these things, uploading human consciousness so that you can go visit people in the funeral home years later on. Covered that. Max Headroom himself was an emergent technology that was conceived from natural intelligence that were uploaded. And that's also a piece of science fiction that's pretty popular. But artificial intelligence, man. I wonder what the next generation of artificial intelligence movies is going to look like post LLM and our classic use of this technology. What does the future hold, do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I think my couple examples here that I brought from the comics realm, I was a big Marvel fan myself, may actually lead to some of that. We've already seen some of that with Ultron. I think Ultron is really neat, and to me really speaks to some of what we are caring about quite a bit in F5 these days. My feel is that the thing that made this guy a superior villain, really to almost anything else the Avengers faced, was the fact that he could replicate self. I mean, this is an AGI that can self-replicate absolutely anywhere, used factories to do so, and did all of this over an amazing wireless technology that was sort of predicted in 1968 by Roy Thomas, who invented Ultron, which I thought was astounding. I mean, he had all these concepts that I didn't really see a lot of in the 60s, and sort of assumed that technology would be in a place that Ultron would be able to do all of these things. So that to me is neat, and I don't want to stay too much on Ultron because I really think that one has been beat to death a little bit. But Warlock, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. This came out in the 80s. So fast forward 20 more years, Chris Claremont brings Warlock to life in the New Mutants. This was a little bit of a different story, and I love Warlock because I think he encompasses a lot of what we've talked about today, which is this kind of ability to work with other humans and to be not only humanoid, but as a techno-organic virus. I mean, literally, this guy's made of virus. His job is to kind of augment the humans that he's around. So he'll take the shape of armor and have other people will actually wear this AI to try and defend them or augment them, or like have an arm come up from out of nowhere where it wouldn't normally be to try and be there. And definitely not humanoid shaped. I mean, he does spend a lot of time there, but
yeah, the art in Warlock is also just phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
absolutely phenomenal.
Bill Sienkiewicz was the first guy to really put him to paper, and it's wonderful. Not sure if anyone else kind of read New Mutants or X-Men, but to me this was the neatest example of AI that I've seen, especially in that he can self-replicate by infecting people.
Yeah. Well, from comics to movies to TV to books and literature and ethics and everything, we've covered a lot today.
We have.
And we got to call back to iRobot, though. We have to call back to Asimov, where a lot of these ideas sort of sharpened from the 20s forward. This is where it got really, really important.
Yeah, like these. That's why I was thinking these books would be, the iRobot books are they're prophetic. And we've hammered this a lot, and I don't want to repave the ground, but the laws that are in there are driving a lot of the decisions that we're trying to make now, and rule sets that people are trying to invent. But everything changes every week. We're going to find a new, there's a new way the model can be compromised. There's a new way the way people can, again, we can threat model it all we want, but we don't know until somebody, going back to the DeepSeek thing, they did everything they could possibly do, and they did it, they tried to do the right thing, but again, they had open doors. They had, their environment was compromisable, not because they wanted it to be, but because they're running at the speed of business, and they're trying to make all these decisions and push it out as quickly as they can, because they want to be the first. Yeah. And we all try to do that. And so that's what we see in the iRobot stories, leading into The Pebble in the Sky and all the other books that are in this series, 17, 19, 21 books, whatever, how you want to count them. And even in the Foundation TV show that's out there now, I had to take 2 or 3 runs at it before I got over the fact that they weren't following the books, to the T. Yeah. I had a Game of Thrones problem in my head, but once I got through it, I like the fact that they're taking a new look at an old problem, and this is just going to continue on. I don't think this is going to be we're going to have a single rule set that's going to say, here's the laws. The laws almost, to me, imply that there's some sort of governing body, and there isn't. We have to have a community that drives these things and self-enforces. Yeah. I don't know how else we can keep going down this path. There's dragons around the corner. Yeah. That's the scary thing.
Sci-fi will show us the way, right?
Well, it will, but I'll come back to that. What I thought about where I started, which is a Heisenberg quote of, yes, we can imagine the future. We can imagine some strange things, but I think the actual future, it will be stranger than we can imagine.
Definitely.
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And on that note, I would like to thank all of you for kind of coming in and sharing this stuff with the community today. I really appreciate it. I think it's fun,
Yeah, absolutely.
Little different than the usual that we.
Oh, yeah, it was great. Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
This was great. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, this was a blast. So
it's a dangerous topic. It can go on forever if we wanted to.
Yes. Well, especially this group.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we need some laws around our conversations. There we go. So.
There you go. I think so. That would actually be good.
I don't want them. No.
I like the fact how Aubrey's managed to reverse aging.
That's a completely different set of movies, folks.
Yeah.
You guys enjoy the mullet?
That's a wonderful mullet, my friend.
Yeah. Literally, they just cut the power at my house, so that's an interesting thing. So
was that the robots doing that, or was that yeah?
No, they rang the doorbell first, and oh well, I'm
It's
I'm back out again, but they can't kill off my cell phone, so
they can't kill the mullet. They can't kill the mullet.
There we go. That'll be the title of this episode. There we go. They can't kill the mullet.
Kill the mullet.
You can't. So, all right. I guess on that note, I'm gonna try and just sort of limp off the screen. So, thank you all of our guests for showing up. Chase, thank you so much for coming and
anytime.
It's appreciated. We'd love to have you back, and thank you, community, for tuning in yet again. Really, we are doing really well here on DevCentral and the other platforms. So we hope to see you back every week. And bye for now.
Bye.
We hope you liked this instantiation of AI Friday. We'll be instantiated again next week, same time, same place, and hope to again infer with you. Before we depart, promptly subscribe for all our content and click like to let us know you enjoyed AI Friday.